Overwatch is a game frustratingly filled with tons of misconceptions. The problem with misconceptions is they can not only cost you games, but hold you back from improving because of the lack of understanding of the game from you and those around you. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the top 8 misconceptions that players consistently say in each and every game all the way up to the higher ranks that is actually hurting the community as a whole and preventing you from maximizing your impact in each and every game you play. With all that being said, let's just jump right into it, shall we? Now, kicking it off with our first big misconception, this is something that I'm sure you've heard of said to you, or you might have even said it yourself: there's not enough damage. Now, let's really break down what this context is implying and why it's really problematic for the game of Overwatch as a whole. The idea behind this is that you simply need characters that do raw damage or they don't get value. Well, this is an interesting concept. I can understand why the community holds this. The idea is you have characters that can do raw damage, break shields, pressure enemies, and confirm kills. That being said, there are tons of DPS that don't require you to do that much raw damage to get impact, and raw damage is actually not implicit in their value. Think a character like Mei, Sombra, Doom, Widowmaker. Do these characters seem weak to you? In fact, most of these characters have dominated entire metas, and these characters almost will never get gold damage. Do you know why they won't? Because they either do burst damage or set up potential kills in other ways. Essentially, if a Mei freezes you and headshots you, she's only going to do your full health and damage. In a similar way, a Doomfist and a Widow will one-shot you before they get any damage at all. And Sombra doesn't do that much solid damage, but she could set up possibilities for her tanks, supports, and other DPS to do tons of damage themselves. In this way, it's not about overall raw damage, it's about focused burst damage and damage with the intent to have specific impact as opposed to damage that gets healed up by the enemy. A Soldier 76 might have 3, 4, 5 times as much damage as a Doomfist, but if none of that damage actually ends up in picks, it's not worth more than a Doomfist getting only 200 damage but insta-killing a squishy. So this is a really problematic mentality to have. So the concept that there's somehow not enough damage and that means you're not going to be able to find impact doesn't really make sense and should not be a rule that we learn from and apply it to Overwatch as a whole. Well, that's not a rule that we should learn from. You know what you should learn from? GameLeap.com. GameLeap.com is filled to the brim with high quality knowledge that you won't find anywhere. We have psychology, game sense, and positioning guides that will help you become that insanely smart player that can outwit your enemies again and again. Do yourself a favor and go check it out, and I hope to see you there. Now, this directly goes to the next point that we have on our list: medals. Now, medals are something that you often hear waved in your face. I'm a tank and I have gold damage, or a DPS would say something like, I have gold damage and gold limbs, so your criticisms of me is completely invalid. The problem with gold as a whole is they're problematic for a number of reasons. One, you can get gold limbs by just doing a tiny bit of damage to targets. Let's say something like a Mora Orb. Mora can constantly do the ending blow or a little bit of damage to targets and get gold limbs even though she didn't do the vast majority of the damage in the first place nor set up the pick. Also, if we're talking to something like gold damage, that's useless for the reasons I talked about before. A Mei could be absolutely hard carrying you and have bronze or no damage medal at all. That doesn't mean she didn't set up plays, confirm kills, and hard carry her team. That just simply means that her character isn't someone that wants to get gold damage, isn't someone that has the capability to get gold damage. And in the same way, a Junkrat can get gold damage, but not actually secure any kills or create actual impact in meaningful ways solo in a way that a Doomfist could. So, you really need to be thinking about these things objectively. Also, healers often have this problem where a healer will say things like, passive aggressive healers will say things like, I have gold heals and I'm only X character and you're that character and you don't have gold heals. The problem with healing is healing doesn't measure impact. While yes, it is a healer's job to heal up their team, that is only one part of many things that they need to do and they can do. They're called supports for a reason because they have impact in other ways. I have personally played Ana, gotten giant 5-man nades, carried a team fight, and we rolled through first and second. And then my second support says something to me like, you need to swap off of Ana, you do not have gold healing, and I'm playing Lucio and I have gold healing. The problem here, and the problem that's emphasized throughout all the medal system, is that it's extremely subjective. Honestly, the medal system is entirely flawed and shouldn't even exist because it helps perpetuate these exact same misconceptions that I'm ranting about in this video. Now, moving on to the next big misconception that is said time and time again is often you see players say something like, get a pick and then we push. This is problematic for a whole bunch of reasons, but the biggest problem here is the idea that you need to get a pick before you push in. In fact, this is the exact opposite way you should be. You should be pushing in to allow your DPS the space to get picks. Simply standing at the choke and waiting for your DPS to get picks doesn't give them the space that they need to get picks, and it makes it far harder for them too. A tank wants to aggressively take the space, so it gives their DPS and supports opportunity to push in and opportunity to make plays. If you have ever said this or ever have heard this being said, I want you to know that this concept doesn't make sense and it shouldn't be applied to any of the Overwatch games you're playing. Now, the next big misconception that is definitely said across all ranks is the idea that you need a shield. Players will say something like, how am I supposed to stay alive? I don't have a shield to hide behind. Or, what are we doing without a shield? Firstly, you do not need a shield in order to engage. While with certain DPS, a shield is definitely good, playing something like Monkey Diva, Monkey Hammond, and characters that dive can definitely create space and do all the things that main tanks need to do without having a shield in the first place. The problem here is many players don't understand that they need to be playing a character that can get in with their tanks and don't need a shield to push in, or even if they do need a shield to push in, they could be playing natural cover and still get value anyways. The idea that right off the bat you need a shield in every single game you play is inherently flawed, and I don't understand why this is a concept that everyone echoes in almost every rank you play. Every single bit of knowledge that we get trickled down for pro play tells us that you don't need a shield in order to have an effective team comp. Dive was meta for many seasons, and Wrecking Ball is one of the most powerful space creators in the entire game, and it doesn't matter that he doesn't have a shield. You can still create space and create value with no shield as a main tank. Now, moving on to the next misconception that I see mess people up and actually cost them tons of games over and over again is the idea that you need 3 people on Payload every single time. No, you do not need 3 people on Payload, and let me explain. The problem is, let's say you're taking King's Row and you take the first point. What you want to do is you want to push up as a 5-man team while one person pushes the payload so that y'all can fight at a pretty much full fighting force and get staggers on the enemy. These staggers give you free ultimate charge, you get to kill the enemy while they're not fully grouped ready to fight you, and it actually gets you more free time before the enemy can test cart. The problem with waiting with 3 or your full team on cart is you let the enemy regroup fully and fight you as a full 6v6. That is going to be worth way less value than staggering the enemy team through streets. While yes, 3 people on Payload definitely push the cart faster, it actually doesn't really push it as far because the potential for staggering the enemy allows you to push it even farther if you would have pushed up as a 5-man team instead of pushing all of you on the payload. Now, there are specific examples where you should have the maximum amount of people on Payload, and that is where if you have 3 people on Payload, you'll be able to cap it before the enemy team touches. This is a very specific judgment call that you need to make. However, the majority of the time, pushing up and taking space with 5 people instead of having 3 people or more on Payload is way better and way more efficient at winning team fights altogether. Now, moving on to the next big misconception on our list, you see this one more than anything. People say not enough heals. You have a character like Mercy or Zen, or maybe you have a Mora or Zen, and someone on the team will say something like, this is not enough heals to sustain us. Now, the problem here is the implication that you somehow need tons of mass heals in order to keep allies up. Now, the fact of the matter is, sure, there will be team compositions where you want more raw healing. But when players say this, they don't really understand what it means or how they're playing incorrectly, and this concept is actually hurting their play altogether. Where this idea comes from is the idea that you can simply just face tank enemy damage over and over again, and your healers can actually heal you through it. It shouldn't be your healer's job to heal you for thousands and thousands of HP while you're tanking the enemy fire. Using natural cover and choosing engagements when you have shield health or when you have full health to engage onto the enemy rapidly instead of just face tanking damage means that if you have even marginal heals, you could still get impact instantly. This concept altogether is usually completely misunderstood and holds the community back as a whole. Now, moving on to the second to last misconception that players often make, even in the highest ranks, is talking about stats without context. Players will say something like, imagine only getting X heals per X minutes. They'll say stuff like, wow, you're such a bad Mercy. You only get XK heals per X minutes? What the heck are you doing? This completely fails to understand the fact that Mercy can be damage boosting to get even more value than heals by counteracting breakpoints, allowing her DPS or hit scan to contest Pharah's or break enemy shields that much quicker. Trying to take people's stats and objectively applying it to their play and their ability to play and have impact as a whole is grossly misevaluating them as a player because it fails to have context. Also, people will misunderstand stats, something like you do X damage per X minutes. Wow, you're terrible. This is also a complete misevaluation. You could be McCree and get 2 key headshot picks. Sure, you're not doing tons of damage, but you're bursting down targets and actually getting kills. The problem here is context matters. This is the same problem that medals create. These misconceptions keep going round and round, furthering our understanding of the game and actually hurting players trying to play in a way that want to maximize those heals per X minutes, that damage per X minutes, when it might not be the most effective strategy, and in fact, it most likely isn't. Now, moving on to the last misconception on the list. This is something that I'm sure that you have heard multiple times. You might have heard it from the support category or the tank category, but especially the DPS category. The idea that you're countered, so swap off. I've heard this time and time again, especially when I used to be at lower ranks, and even when I'm trying to rank up an alternate account, people will say stuff like this. The enemy team has a monkey and you're Genji, so swap off. It doesn't matter the value I'm having, it doesn't matter the picks I'm getting. If they have a monkey, automatically I'm countered, so swap. This is a funny concept to me. The idea that an enemy could play a single character and it could make my character useless. This completely disevaluates the ability for me to play around that monkey, or maybe the monkey isn't even contesting me at all. What I'm saying here is, even against hard counters, there's ways to adapt your playstyle in order to still get value. A Pharah can still play against a Widow that she's being countered by if she plays intelligently. A monkey can't kill a Genji if Genji saves his dash to disengage, or he only uses his dash when he's gonna guarantee a kill. This means that if Monkey ever wants to dive a Genji, Genji can easily dash away. Well, sure, Monkey is an inherent counter to Genji. That doesn't mean he outright counters every single playstyle that the Genji can make. You know how to guaranteed value even against hard counters? Heading on over to GameLeap.com. GameLeap.com has in-depth guides that can teach you how to find impact in any situation, even when the enemy team is trying to shut you down. We have in-depth guides and VOD reviews that show you exactly what you need to do step by step in order to have impact in any situation. So come check us out risk-free, and I hope to see you there. Anyways, I hope this guide has been helpful for you in dispelling some of these misconceptions. The problem with many of these misconceptions is it puts the game into these tiny little boxes that is often used to hold people back, flame people, and completely misunderstands the many different things that can happen in a game of Overwatch. The thing about a lot of these things is there might be truth to some of them, but they all are contextual. They're subjective to the game and they're subjective to the individual play. Saying blanket statements in the dark like we need a shield or not enough damage or get a pick and push doesn't really actually quantify the things that you need in order to win more games of Overwatch. I hope that watching this video has helped you understand these misconceptions more, and I hope you can take this into your games and help the community as a whole become smarter and become less toxic together. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Agree or disagree, I would love to hear your thoughts. As well as any video concept ideas, I would love to make them. Please let me know. That's all I have for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time.